There's been confirmation today that Australia and China are cooperating on a study into whether Australian land could be farmed to help feed China's 1.3 billion population. It's understood the study's scope concentrates on whether the Chinese investment could be used to develop land in northern Australia to shore up China's supplies of beef, sheep, sugar and dairy. China, Australia's largest trading partner, is already looking to South America and to Africa to help secure its food security. But both the Coalition and the Greens are wary.
I believe in foreign investment, but we create all sorts of problems for ourselves when we get excessive foreign investment and economic choke points that controls large sections of production, or when you get a large-scale purchase of agricultural land. Where we are currently, an individual from overseas can buy up to $244 million worth of land before they even have to refer it to the Foreign Investment Review Board.
I think we need to know now exactly what is the government proposing in relation to future ownership of Australian agricultural land and water resources.
Trade Minister Craig Emerson has been in China this week pursuing the idea. He's expected to release the results of the study within months. For more, Mick Keogh, the Executive Director of the Australian Farm Institute, joins us in the studio. Mick, welcome to The Drum.
Thank you.
Is this something we should be pursuing? Do we want to become the food bowl for China?
Well, China's become a very big net agricultural importer since it acceded to the WTO in 2001. So it had to reduce its agricultural import tariffs, and it recognised then that its future lay in manufacturing, not in producing agricultural stuff. So it's become a dominant player in world markets and imports around $60 billion worth US of food every year, and that's growing quite quickly. So the opportunities are enormous for Australia, and we're already a fairly major trader with China.
But it seems to be a very sensitive issue, particularly within the National Party. There's concerns that it will lead to Chinese ownership of vast tracts of land. Would that happen, and if so, is it a problem?
Look, I think that's a long way off happening. If it did happen through a state-owned enterprise, it would have to go via the FIRB. If it was a very substantial one, as mentioned earlier, it would also have to go through scrutiny. But I think the biggest issue in terms of Northern Australia has been government commitment to the resources and infrastructure needed to develop it. And that money has simply not been there because, of course, voters in Perth or Brisbane don't really get excited about a lot of money going north. So,
is there a reason why that land hasn't been developed?
A combination of things. It's pretty tough. In terms of the seasons, it's not all good land. It's not as if there's a vast empty landscape there. And there's a whole range of infrastructure and services that aren't available in Northern Australia that would need to be put in to get that land developed. So there's a lot of associated investment needed, and perhaps that's why the Australian government's so interested.
And what kind of areas are we talking about?
Areas on the northwest of Western Australia, around the Ord River and some of those sorts of areas, and areas around northern Queensland along the coastal areas there as well, which are recognised as having the resource base and the appropriate agronomic and other features, but simply require a bit of investment.
What about the arguments that foreign ownership of Australian farms pushes up the price of land and it pushes out Australian farmers who want to buy that land?
Yeah, there's certainly those concerns. In the case of Northern Australia, there's not many Australians with deep enough pockets to put the investment in to get going up there. It's also notoriously difficult to get Australian investment advisors interested in agricultural investments. They tend to be of a different type of risk to normal investments, and they tend to require patient investors because it takes a long while to get your returns, which eventually come. So typically we're seeing very strong interest from European investors who've got long-term annuities they've got to pay out over time, and Asian and Middle Eastern investors who see it as a food security issue which they're prepared to pay for and be patient about, rather than want instant returns, which the super funds in Australia tend to want.
And that's that term Craig Emerson used, patient, isn't it?
Patient investors.
Richard?
It's not just in food that China's doing this. Their strategy in terms of resources is very simple. You buy it in the ground, or you buy it in its rawest form. You buy the means of production or refinement. You buy the means of transport so that you own the entire production chain. And that's what they're planning to do here. I think that the term patient capital is very carefully used by Dr. Emerson, in that this is, make no mistake, this is government capital. This is party capital that is behind this, because traditionally private capital in China doesn't have a long investment horizon, but planning for the future there's no doubt that there is a long-term plan here from the Chinese government. My concern is if we lock ourselves into China and they're looking at, and there were terms about regional food security, this has nothing to do with the region. So why aren't we talking to other governments who will have a food security problem in 30 years' time? Why aren't we talking to Vietnam? Why aren't we talking to the Philippines? Why aren't we talking to Malaysia, to Thailand? Why aren't we taking this to a regional approach?
Supply of ready capital. I mean, China's already
that's the thing, is that
bankrolling everybody in the world.
But I come back to Julia Gillard's statement last night about holding things in trust for future generations. Here is a government in China which is not bound by the same vagaries of short-termism that we tend to be, or that emerging democracies in the region tend to be. They're the people in the right place at the right time with the cash. But the question is, how much of our future do we compromise, not only from a security perspective, not only from if things, you know, if there's a great food shortage in 30 years' time in the region and it's all going to China, how do we feel about that as a responsible regional citizen, about people starving in other countries? I think that there are really deep issues that are at play here.
OK, it'd be good to continue this conversation, but we've run out of time. But thanks very much to the panellists. Mick, thanks for coming in. The panel tonight was Annabelle Crabb, Richard Muller and Lizzie O'Shea. You can check out the website for The Drum at abc.net.au/The Drum. I'll be back on Monday with The Drum. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night for Planet America at the same time with John Barron and Chaz Lichdetto. See you soon.